Hey everybody, Corey from aquariumcoop.com. Today we're building an 800, well no that's not true. We're building a sump for the 800 gallon tank, and we've got 135 right here and 120 right there. We need to cut them down so that they give us the right clearance. So that's what like the first part of the video is going to be. That I've never cut a tank down. I've heard of people doing it, but I've got Corey Vasaskin right behind the camera. He's done it before, and so we're going to attempt such a fate.
We're gonna put a sump on it.
We are.
Whoa.
Hashtag put a sump on it. Don't fall over on it. Like that video ends if you break it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna get some stuff jigged up, and then we're gonna see if we can not make a horrible melty mess out of heated up blades and stuff like that. So that's not good. All right. So we've finished the sump. We've plumbed it in. Now it's time to talk about it. So let's start from where the water comes in. And now obviously I would put all the panels on this, but I left them all off so that we could explain it. So we've got water coming in from up top. That flows down. We've got two 2-inch drains here. One is a Herbie drain. This allows it to run silent. You see how there's like no bubbles, there's just water flowing. We're running over 3,000 gallons per hour silent. The loudest sound you're probably hearing right now is bubbles or the air pump. But rest assured, tons of flow is happening. In the first chamber, we have 3 Fluval 300 heaters running 900 watts just to keep it nice, hot, toasty in here. And then we go to this. And this is, I think, and there is one clown loach I got to catch out of there. It went over when I was calibrating. But this is the most innovative part, I think, personally, is this vertical filter pad. So normally in a sump, you have the pad running this way and it falls down onto it. And we had that in the old system. But this one, the water comes down, up, and then flows through all of them, right? So as you can see here, this one's nice and brown. This one's been going for about 10 days. And you see how the water level is a little bit higher right here? So it rises up until it gets to here, and then it can get through. Well, as this gets plugged up, eventually it'll overrun the whole thing, and I'll just replace this pad. Then we look at this pad. This pad, there's some shadows going on here, but it's not nearly as brown. You see how that one's really brown, not as brown? So it's going to bypass that one, start to here, and then we go to this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. So as you can see, the water level kind of dips down to each one a little bit more. And the goal is, when I need to replace this one, you just pull this out, and if it releases any gunk, that gets caught by this pad, put a brand new one in, really, lift this one up. And the goal would be hopefully, that this one gets replaced like every 2 weeks, this one gets replaced like once a month, this one like every 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and almost never on this very last one. The very last one's running pretty darn clean. So the goal is that we get super duper clean water, and if I hadn't been just filming another video and scared the daylight out of all the clown loaches when I opened the door to the other studio, this water was crystal clear. Like, don't get me wrong, it is clear. You have to zoom in to see the particles, but it was crystal clear. And it's really doing a much better job. So then we've got the water change system. Water comes in there. I can put it anywhere in here. I hung it right there for, I don't know, I could hang it there. It doesn't matter where I hang it. Then we come through and we've got the undergravel filter. So this, we're running 4 uplift tubes, and you can see there's 3 of them and the 4th one right there. And the bottom layer is crushed coral. We've got about 2 inches of crushed coral. This is going to help stabilize pH. But what I'm also hoping is that any of the finest particles that made it through there, this would be stuff under like 50 micron, comes through here and then gets pulled through the gravel down there and trapped. And yes, you're going to go, don't you have to gravel vac that at some point? Yes, but it should be such fine. Oh, by the way, there goes the dojo loach. Everyone always says, is the dojo loach still there? He's still there. But maybe once every 6 months or a year, I'd have to get in there and really clean that bottom layer. And then above that, I have 50 bags of bio rings at this point. I could put one more layer if I really needed to. I could put one more layer through there. And this is where it's going to grow the majority of my biological bacteria. Now, when I did set this sump up, there was no biological except for my gravel up here. You can see, you know, it's well established. So I went really light on the feeding, swapped out all the biological. And then the last chamber here, we have 2 pumps. That might look a little weird, but I'll explain it. So we've got the one return pump in the back. That's running over 3,000 gallons per hour. Returns into the tank. And I have to order a black T valve. But without the T, it was really going really fast at 3,000 gallons per hour. With the T, much more docile flow, which is good. And then I've got the second pump. This second pump is an Eheim pump connected to a float valve. So what happens here? When the water level rises from the automatic water change, it pumps this water out all the way into the drain line. So you can see that drain line right there, that white line and that black line, that's the drain line. Now the problem is that line is higher than this sump. So it had to be pumped out and it couldn't be gravity fed. Just one of those, you know, unfortunate things. And then the capacity, we wanted to increase capacity because it's an 800-gallon aquarium. And when it drops down by an inch or two from water, all that water's got to be held here. And as you see, we're running it relatively high. We were running it lower, but it was really on a fine line. So we added a reserve back here. We basically added another 75-gallon aquarium that holds more water, and we've got it plumbed together right there, so the water is shared. So now we have, you know, roughly 175 gallons worth of sump area. Long term, we might treat that sump in the back as a denitrification area where we move very slow amounts of water and put things like maybe coral or lava rock in there to grow anaerobic bacteria. But this, in my opinion, is a pretty simple setup. You know, we're not doing anything too crazy. We've got first compartment heaters, we've got fine filtration, we've got crushed coral and bio rings, and then we've got pumps. And then we have 2 more pumps over there. I need to put those like on a mouse mat so they don't vibrate this decking a little bit. And I got to put the cover back on, and this thing runs basically silent, and that's the key thing here. A lot of people, you know, if you don't know how to make your sump run silent, look into Herbie drain systems where you basically have one main valve and then a backup overflow that just has a bare trickle going through it, and you can run essentially a silent system down here, and it doesn't have to be all chaos and loud because we film in here and we do the live streams. So if you guys have any questions, put them down below. I'll try and answer them. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this build. I learned a ton. I know we're going to build some more sumps for some more projects. We're making some room. As you can see here, this was the old basically 275 or 300 gallon sump that's here. Maybe we put a tank here. Who knows what goes here? Maybe it goes over where all this equipment is. But we do know we've got more to build, and this was super fun, and hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys liked. Let me know what we can do better, and we'll see you guys next time. Alright, so we've got the tank. It's on its back. We put plywood down so it doesn't rest on a rock while we're maybe applying pressure and cutting. You don't want to cause a crack while we're trying to cut this thing down. This is another headache. We chose to use acrylic. This is a used tank. You can see it's kind of all scratched up on the front. And there's deposits and all that kind of stuff. And the other one actually has a crack in the top. I was able to get this 135 for 75 bucks, I believe. Was that? No, it was 125 bucks. 125 bucks. And then the other tank there I got for 40 bucks because it did have a crack. We're going to have to cut them both down. But I like acrylic for sumps because, one, they're light to move around. And 2, you can modify them, drill them a lot easier than glass. Now, if it happens to work out where you have a glass tank that's going to be the right size, perfect. But this thing's 2 feet tall, and the space underneath my 800 gallon is only 27 inches. So we're going to cut it down to about 16 inches, and we're jigging it up. And so if you don't know what that means, we basically are going to set the level of this piece of wood, and we're going to run a saw down the tank that has an acrylic cutting blade. And we just have to make sure we measure correctly so that each side is actually cut. So it's not like, oh, this one's at 16, the back is 16 and a half, kind of goes at a diagonal. Like, that wouldn't be optimal by any means. But once we get that, you know, kind of this thing cracked open, and then we can start filling in the sump. We basically want a chamber where water's going to come in, kind of a higher level, so that it stays quiet. Then we're going to go through a system that I hadn't seen before, but Joel loves in his fish room. So we're going to develop that out here, and that is a series of vertical filter pads. And then we're going to go to an undergravel filter with crushed coral on it, and then put biomedia on top of that. And then the last chamber is going to have the return pump, and then also a sump pump so that I can still do auto water changes on my 800 gallon, because the sump will be sitting lower than my normal drain line. So we're going to keep jigging and doing all that kind of stuff. We'll chime in, you know, I'll probably record Joel sawing stuff or myself sawing stuff, and that'll be loud and painful, but, you know, that's what we got to do today. It's a sump or bust today, I think. It won't be on the thing because I got to go to China, so I don't want to like change my system dramatically and then leave to China in 2 days. But when I get back from China, we will flip the switch and make it operational. Also, we got to drill the 800 gallon for at least one more hole, so that takes time. But today is, let's get this sump basically built. Got the level marked at 16 inches. We got the other level marked. Now we're setting the gap, because there's always going to be a guide on the saw, so you got to offset that, set the bore the correct thing so that the guide cuts it at the correct level. Luckily with this, if we were to cut it and it was 15.5, that's fine so long as we match the other side. It's when you get to the last sides where there's no like, oops, we measured wrong. You can measure wrong the first time as long as you're reasonably close. Like, don't cut it down to 3 inches, obviously. But, you know, the first cut's the easy one. It's all the ones after that where you really got to make sure you measured from the same point and all that each time. So it's, you know, measure 40 times, cut once, because acrylic tanks are expensive. And by the way, in my opinion, it is much cheaper to buy a scratched up acrylic tank than it is to buy new acrylic and build it yourself. You save time and money, and it repurposes something. So something like this, you know, someone might have used it, but if they don't use it, like that other one's cracked and all scratched up really bad, no one's probably going to use that, so we're really repurposing that and putting a new good life to it. So you can see there, you've got the second mark. We line the wood up there. The saw's guide will guide right against that, and assuming you have a relatively straight piece of wood, you're going to go right down. Now, yes, you could buy something built out of aluminum and a whole jig and that kind of stuff, or we're doing it like you might do it in your garage, and you're like, hey, it's a piece of wood.
Well, the problem is that if we use one of those aluminum saw guides,
Yeah.
right, we don't know if the top is bowed at all.
Oh, that's a good
from
point.
It having water in
that's
it
a
for
good
such
point.
a long time.
Yeah.
So we might not end up with a straight cut if we use a guide that's either going to grab onto the bottom or the top, because we don't know what this has been through. Obviously, it's had water in it for a long time, so
yeah.
it will shift.
I hadn't thought about the fact that all the distortion. That's a good point. So it might even be better to use this wood method and not rely on a, you know, $125 guide that would have maybe made the wrong cut to begin with.
Yeah.
So good point. That's why I've never done this before. And I would have went and bought like, oh, I need the guide. I don't know how to do this, so I'm going to go buy the guide, and that would have been a problem. So, all right, well, we're going to put the camera down, and, you know, it's one of those things I'm watching him go back and forth. Usually that's him going, yeah, tap it a little bit over here, tap it a little bit over there, so I can save time by helping. Here we go. This is the, oh, yeah, we're going to cry moment.
Are you going to cry?
No, I'm not going to cry, but it's probably going to be really loud, and we're going to have to, like, montage or speed this up or something.
Alright, we're just taping this up. We're taping this up so, you know, just this first bead of tape isn't really going to do anything, but we're going to take some pieces that go up and down this way. Just help hold it together, because we're going to flip it over, we're going to cut the other side. Yeah. We don't want it warping and shifting and potentially...
Because already you pointed out that there's already a difference between this panel and this panel, just with no pressure on it at all, it just wants to sit differently. So
yeah, so we're just going to tape it up to hold it. This wouldn't hold water, you know.
Oh, that's not a certified patch?
I think it's not certified. It's pretty good, but, you know.
Yeah. And we flip it and we cut more. And we'll show you at the end when we cut this thing, the last one. By the way, if you want to see other takes of this build, it'll be on the Corvus Oskin channel. That's why his camera's right behind him. And
It's in my mouth
yes,
and eyes.
that's why you have those safety glasses on, and I don't. That's why I stand back here.
That's right.
And I just film. I put a camera in front of me, it'll protect me, right? Whoa. There we go, in 2 pieces. Now, we've got a sump that, or at least a smaller tank that we can build a sump out of. You think, I assume, this is me assuming, but I've never done this. You think we'll have to brace it through the center somewhere? It's not that tall. Like, there won't be that much water in it. I wonder how much deflection will happen.
The baffles.
Oh, the baffles will do it, yeah.
Or the bracing, yeah.
All right, yeah, I'm a moron. All right, so Joel's been sanding. You can see he's basically breaking the edges, so when you go to like take something out of the sump, you don't just like cut yourself open. So we broke the edges, and that's what that's called when you kind of like take the corner off. You break the edge is what it's called. Yeah, like this one's real sharp still because it hasn't had any sanding on the long ways. So you could cut yourself because it's a little saw bladey or like steak knifey. Where this is nice, it's smoother because we sanded it down a bit, but the edges haven't been broke. So that's part of this prep I would recommend for any acrylic tank.
What's that torch over there?
Yeah, the torch, the flame polish. We'll put that on video too. You want to make sure you don't heat the acrylic up way too much. You'll cause crazing, which it's not a display tank anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But it'll basically make the ends clear. And yeah, he's back to doing his thing.
So we've got the finished portion over here, where we've actually sanded and stuff. So I want to give you guys a close-up of how to sand it real quick. This actually is just a, plain old rotary sander. Most people will have this somewhere.
Or can borrow one from a neighbor.
Or you could borrow one from a neighbor or something. This isn't
Yeah.
like a belt sander or anything crazy like that most people won't have. So we're actually just going to round the edges here real quick. Show you guys what it's like. So then we got a pretty reasonably sanded edge there. Now, would I typically do this with a router? Yes, but this is a great way to do it for just anybody who's making something at their house, okay? And this is a typical tool that somebody would have out there. This is just a 220 grit sandpaper on here. You can actually do this by hand even if you don't have the tool. It would just take a long time. This is a standard torch. This actually has MAP gas on it. Most people will have the blue tank, which is like propane or something like that. MAP gas actually burns a lot hotter than propane does. And oftentimes you see videos out there where people are flame polishing and stuff like that. That's how this is done. We can actually kind of walk you through it a little bit. When we start it up, you can see the flame's burning. We don't want to use this the very front part of the flame. We're actually going to use off of the side a little bit. Now, we're going to burn this on purpose to show you how much too much flame is, okay? And there you go. Once it actually starts to bubble and craze because it gets too hot, right? Yeah. And the crazing is actually on this. You can start to see on the side of the tank, and you can see it, hear it actually bubbling and popping and stuff like that.
Still on fire.
And it's still on fire. So they actually put it out. That's going to be too much heat. That's not actually going to work. But we can take the torch, kind of walk it back and forth. There we go. So it's a little bit slower, right? So you want to go low and slow. You can still see there's lines and stuff in there because we didn't sand it really
You have to go to a finer grit.
You have to go to a finer grit, and obviously we just sanded it for like 20 seconds. Normally we'd do a lot more. But you can see how much clearer it is, and now there's no dust or anything left like there is over here. Yeah. You can see how it's all dusty and kind of gross and stuff. Mm-hmm. You actually just kind of flame it down like that, and then just put a little polish on it and kind of seal it. But if you do go too hot, you see that it catches on fire and then will damage. But if you notice down here, because we kind of walk back and forth and use the side, you see how the acrylic down here is just the same as it was. It just has some dust on it and stuff like that, but there's no bubbles in it, no cracks or anything like that, like there is over here.
Yeah.
So it is just something, like, get some, if you are going to flame polish, just to show you like how quickly that could get burned and like light on fire, basically. And get damaged.
Yeah, if this was a display tank, we've essentially ruined it.
So
we'd have to buff it.
Yeah, this is the scrap piece that we're using just to illustrate like how you can kind of screw it up. But you know, with how much nicer this is sanded over here, that's basically all we're gonna do around the whole entire tank, just to make it just a little bit nicer, clean up all the dust and the stuff that's on there, and any kind of little tiny edges and everything like that will be filled in by the flame polish. You know what I mean? So it'll just be one solid seam.
Yeah, helps self-level a little bit on. It just takes the roughness off.
Yeah. So
there we go, guys. Back to it we go. All right. Well, we got our 18 by 18 squares, and then we got our scraps. So the scraps, all of the scraps together, cost $12. And there's a lot there, right? And those are like 1 foot pieces. These 18 by 18, because we had to have them cut, were $20.81 each. So there's 60 bucks there and about 12 bucks there, and there's more acrylic there. And that's why we're using a used aquarium as the main thing, because it was already thicker acrylic, and to build this thing would have cost us much more than $125 that we paid, because you see here, like, wait, if that's 60 bucks for 3 of those, that's only, you know, what is that? 3.5 feet. And we have a 6 foot aquarium, and there's multiple sides in the bottom and all that. So saving a ton of money this way, but it's still not free or cheap, but saving what we can. Had we planned out further, we could have stopped by here once a week, found some scraps, and that will be, if we do again, we'll do that move and save some money. But we got to build. To the coop we go. All right, so here's that piece we just cut. We chose to use, by the way, 1/4 inch acrylic, because anything less, it's really not gonna add that much strength. We wanna add as much strength as we can while being able to afford it. And here's where we can see how bowed this thing is. So you can see, you know, there's a pretty decent gap on either side here. Like, I can fit my finger on either side. So we're gonna have to, you know, basically pull it in tight while it glues and have it held with a clamp. But it looks like the bottom, where it's least bowed, tight fit. So that means we cut it correct. Now it's just making the tank, you know, let me see if I can get a side shot of that. Well, it won't focus correctly, and the reflection makes it look like that's like 1 inch, but it's not that big. It's big, but it ain't that big.
Oh, here you go. Put this.
Yeah, that is like 1/2 inch. That might be a little more. Like, that's quite a bit, but we got to come, you know, at least lays flat at the bottom there. And so yeah, we'll want to make sure that we probably do this bottom one first.
Yep.
And then put the top one in, so we don't have to crunch it in nearly as much. So back to cutting the other ones we need.
Well, we're going to be using ourselves some 16 acrylic weld.
So the number applies to how thick it is and how fast it sets. So the 16, so basically the higher the number, the slower it sets.
Yeah, 5 to 6
essentially
minutes.
how it works.
Oh wait, what's the set time? 5 to 6 minutes? Fixture time 10 minutes? 10 minutes. All right.
80% strength, 24 hours.
All right.
Yeah. So you're going to have to let it sit for 24 hours.
Yeah, before we really start torquing on it.
Yeah. And then, so the work time is 5 to 6 minutes on this one.
Yep.
Work time on like the 4 is...
And that one looks like water. It's super runny, and you use a needle to apply it.
It's acetone. It's really what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for people that have never worked with acrylic, what happens here is basically it fuses it into one piece of acrylic, right? Because it basically softens up each piece, and then it reforms and hardens as one piece.
Yep.
And so yeah, this is more like super glue gel if you've ever done it, like the consistency, I would say.
Is this one, yeah.
Yep. And you just want to, we're going to hit all the seams of that piece once we get the clamps in place to hold it where we need it. So we'll get that set up. We'll chime back in. And this is called a bar clamp, I believe. It's like a longer version of a C-clamp. So if you have to go, like, I think I got those ones at Harbor Freight. If you're looking for this, you're looking for a bar clamp. Most people, if you are working with wood and that stuff, you're very familiar with these, but this is your first kind of, yeah, I'm going to need myself some 2-foot bar clamps.
Right.
And they can be very expensive at Lowe's and Home Depots. These are much cheaper ones. They're probably like $13 a piece from Harbor Freight or something. So you can see on screen here how it's kind of going from, you can see a gap to like, it just looks like it's wet down there. And that's it traveling underneath and sealing it up. So now we're test fitting the Metalla mat. This is something they use in koi ponds. It's basically plastic mesh, and there's different porosities based on color. The blue is going to be a little bit more coarse than the black. And we're going to use it to hold fine filter floss, and we're doing it in a vertical fashion, which I hadn't seen before Joel started doing it, which he saw other people doing it, but it's not a well-known thing that I know of. All right, well, it's not quite the end of my workday, but so the end of the workday for the sump, we're gonna film feeding the 800 gallon, and yeah, so you can kind of see we got a baffle there. We have a brace here. We have all our Metalla mats with some more stuff to come. That'll be shown in the full-blown video, and some more baffles up here. Gotta let everything dry and cure, and then we'll make something cool of it. You know, we get to put it together. You know.